know. There we go.
Yep.
The meeting's been recorded. Cool.
Yep, we started that. So we're all good.
Alrighty. So thank you, people, for joining. As Steve said, my name's Paul. This is a brand new talk. When I say brand new, I mean today, brand new. I've been collaborating with people for the past few weeks now on the content, the messaging, what we want the community to know about. So hopefully, I do my job today is like, you know, educating and communicating what's actually happening under the hood and what's to come. So very briefly, it says, who am I? Basically, I just grabbed this from the meetup description. I work on open source for a long time. I work on Jenkins projects. I work on PHP team and interoperability groups and create standards. I'm a member of the CDF, which is Continuous Delivery Foundation. After this talk, you'll know who the CDF are and what they do. And I work as an independent consultant, and I do various different roles. And I spend most of my time rolling out CI/CD pipelines within companies, but also continuous delivery processes and solutions into, you know, public and private sector companies, from banks to governments to, you know, private sector financial companies and things like that. So I've been around. I also do public speaking. So I do loads of, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a lot of continuous CI and CD talks and workshops at conferences, meetups and stuff like that. This talk is fresh, and what you can expect later this year is I'll give this talk now today, and then get some good feedback, and then in 2-3 weeks time I'll give an enhanced version of the talk at another meetup, 2 or 3 meetups later, and then what I do is then take my talks to conference level. So by the time it hits a conference level, like the talk's going to be badass basically. So it's quite basic. Again, let's say it's like version 0.1 of the talk. So I hope I've got enough in here, but please, you know, keep an eye on for the next iterations of stuff that I'm releasing. So here's the agenda, what we're going to cover. So a preamble, meaning like the prerequisite as to 2021, how we got here. So I'm going to break that down into like what CI, this is very brief as well. The preamble is like the brief part, and then we can get stuck into the meaty stuff. What CI/CD has looked like traditionally, what's changed, what challenges happened when the change kicked in, and then how this change triggered innovation. And then I'll go into some detail highlighting and showcasing what innovations have been happening under the hood. Some of you will be at different levels. Some of you may be engineers, some of you maybe be like head of DevOps or whatnot. So there's quite a variety of attendees today. So I'm trying not to go into like too low-level engineering details, but enough details so that engineers have something to grasp from the talk. But we don't lose, say, non-engineers at the same time. So there's a balance to be struck on what innovations we've been up to, and then lastly, basically where the innovations are taking us now into the future, and then what to expect from the open source community, the CDF community, and the cloud native community for the next 2 or 3 years as we move forward. So if anyone's got any questions, if you notice at the very bottom of the slides, there's a small black number. So if you're writing questions in the chat and it's, you know, so I can find the slide, or I can go back to a slide, you could just say like slide 12, I have a question, if it's relevant, if there is a slide number. So pointing that out, and depending on what comes into the chat or doesn't come into the chat, I might stop and answer some questions, or we'll just do the standard Q&A at the end if there is any. The talk is recorded, and I will publish my slides. I'll give them to Steve to drop them onto the meetup page, the LinkedIn event, and I'll tweet them as normal as well. So into the talk. This is effectively where we've been for the past 20 years, right? You recognize this. It's just one big app, right? Monolithic. And that's fine. That suited us. And effectively, the pipeline is the reflection of that. Very simple pipeline. Easy to build the pipeline, easy to run it, execute it, and do stuff, right? For the monolithic app. And effectively, it's quite simple to take that pipeline and progress that application through its life cycle all the way up to production. quite predictable, right? We had the tooling in place. For example, we had Jenkins, which basically was almost everything to do with CI and CD for a long time now. So yeah, life was simple, predictable, and it's pretty stable. And then what happened is here basically software organizations and internet companies, the demand upon the rate of software that has to be produced to keep up with the demand, and the scale of that as well was kind of like what was changing on the internet, like say 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when it really kicked off. And because, like I say in the slide, there's unprecedented demand, so this new demand has triggered changes, but the CI and CD software that we in the community, open source or proprietary, wasn't ready for that, right? So it just could not cope with what needed to be new stuff, right? Open source moves quite slowly, so we didn't really see things, say from Jenkins or for other projects, really immediately be able to facilitate the change. So effectively, what changed, right? So if you're thinking about two things: scale and rate of change. That is those are two of many driving factors behind why microservices became a thing, across the globe, and effectively we went from trying to deploy 1 unit of software to 4, 5, 6, 20, 100 units of software. But the pipelines we had weren't really compatible for that. They're still in a monolithic mindset, right? So what happened then is basically pipeline development all of a sudden it became very complex, trying to reuse code between pipelines, because we have a pipeline for each service, and you have 10, 15 services now, then you've got 10 or 15 pipelines. How do they integrate? When do they integrate? Why do they integrate? What should they do? What should they share? What should they not share? Basically, there was no rules. It was just the Wild West, and everybody just done their own thing. People are trying to innovate from an open source perspective, but then you have the private companies leading the way as well. And that's where open source didn't really facilitate us, and where we had private companies leading the way for microservices like advice, white papers, but also proprietary like general purpose pipeline systems as well, to try to take the money from the financials from the private sector and to provide generic general purpose solutions like Circle CI or bucket pipelines. And we now have GitHub Actions, which is also coming on, and again, GitHub themselves are creating their own innovations in this space, which is then feeding back to open source worlds, and the open source world are looking at GitHub Actions and saying, hey, that's actually really clever. We're going to implement an open source solution for the tool that you need to pay for, right? But they are primitive, they are opinionated. That's the point. If they are opinionated, then if they work for your organization, for now, that's good. But the problem with opinionated systems is that over time, as you want to make changes to your processes, these tools are quite primitive, and they're not as flexible, and so you basically end up structuring your organization around the capabilities of these proprietary systems and general purpose systems. That was very good because it innovated and it solved a problem. Now we're kind of coming 2 years ago, innovation of the open source world really kicked in and started facilitating. Hold on a sec. I hear a mic. Steve, is your mic on?
Yeah, I've just muted that one for you.
Okay. It's just I could hear background. It's a basic, yeah. We're coming. The point is now we're coming full circle. So, open source community started innovating 4 or 5 years ago, but no one's really going to see that at the surface level, or even at the organizational level. So I'm hoping by today you'll see some things that's been happening as well. And the focus is all about cloud native, and the whole buzz around cloud native. This is a cloud native meetup. Basically, just means that effectively, in a nutshell, it's Kubernetes, right? And Kubernetes is an agnostic system. You can have Kubernetes clusters running on Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, all these services. And if you run something that works on Kubernetes, if it's cloud native, it means it can move between clouds. It doesn't care which cloud it's on that much. You just tell Kubernetes what you want, and then it will facilitate that. Obviously, that's not an accurate description, but it maybe makes the point. So everything now is cloud native focused. In the past, we had just like, here's a CI system. We have a Jenkins, and we have a Jenkins machine, an agent, and that's going to, we install things on that agent like Java or PHP or stuff, and then it does tasks, right? But that's not really scalable. It's not interoperable. It doesn't, you can't move it from cloud to cloud, etc. And so that's why you're seeing, you're already seeing, and we'll continue to see cloud native focus on pretty much all tools that are released these days, especially with a CD context. These are some of the innovations that I'm going to talk to you about, right? I would say that Argo GitOps is not a tool; it's a way of working. Again, and Argo is also at the heart of a lot of the innovation, and also facilitating, allowing people to take advantage of the innovations that we have been experiencing. Again, it's all open source; it's all ready to pick up, and different tools will have their own level of bias or how opinionated they are. So even just this slide in itself, I hope would give you some names to look up. The style of talks and slides that I make, it's more about, here's some information, go and check it out yourself, go do some Google searches. There's people who already probably wrote large blog posts, and they can tell you a lot more information about it here. So my talk is kind of like snippets of everything that's going on. So you may have heard of Tekton, which is one of the first real innovative projects that took off, that shifted us from like closed, kind of like Jenkins type machines to cloud native pipeline solutions. We've got Flux CD. So Flux CD and Argo CD are quite similar. They have their own pros and cons, but they are at the heart of facilitating the innovation and allowing companies to make their own continuous delivery solutions around their businesses' processes. Jenkins X is effectively, you could describe it quite similar to Argo in a way, or Spinnaker, saying that it's the Jenkins, just because it has the name Jenkins, it actually has nothing really to do with the original Jenkins, right? X is like cross cloud, native, agnostic, but I'll go into detail in more slides around these tools. I don't have slides that are going into detail on Shipwright, Ortelius, Kept, Hermit, or Helmfile, or Screwdriver. So these are all things that you could go and check out yourself and see, where they fit into your organization or into your tool set. But these, if not all of these, are cloud native stuff, and they're all facilitating microservice based continuous delivery, right? And there's so many parts of that life cycle, everything from local development, like on your local machine. That's where tools like Hermit come in, to like, deploying things in the cloud or whatnot, right? There is also something I want to talk to you about, which is the CD Foundation. So I'm a member of CD Foundation, and effectively it's a sub foundation of the Linux Foundation. So the Linux Foundation being the main entity behind the Linux operating system, and under that, historically for the past 10 years or more, we've had the Apache Software Foundation and a few others that are like sub foundations of the Linux Foundation. You probably be aware of the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and that's the incubator for Kubernetes and loads of other innovative software that we've seen over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And now, as of like 1.5 years ago, or thereabouts, the CD Foundation was born. It's effectively a sister project, or a twin project to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, whereby we have a different focus. We have a very specific focus, and we're utilizing the innovation that's coming out of the CNCF projects and everything evolving around Kubernetes and Cloud Native. So it's basically saying we're going to look at and take all of the stuff that's in the Cloud Native, the CNCF, and the Kubernetes ecosystems, and specifically which ones help facilitate continuous delivery, and we're going to take them, we're going to try and take care of them and bring them under our sort of family of projects that the Linux Foundation are putting money on the table, basically, to hire people and bring people from organizations so then they can provide resources to help with to catch up, basically, because the private sector innovated to solve things, but it's just general purpose stuff. And then the CD Foundation is trying to help accelerate things so that the open source, again, the world catches back up with the demand for change. And therefore the tools we will have are fit for purpose again. And I hope that made sense to folks where we're at. The CD Foundation also have CDCon, which is a conference dedicated to showcasing what's happening, and also to a platform for these projects, these innovative CD projects. It gives them a platform to then, for the world to see them and to hear what's going on. I spoke at the first CDCon. There's the second CDCon happened in June this year, and I would expect there's another one either later this year or 2022. So keep your eyes peeled for that stuff. This is the gold dust. And yeah, and part of the CD Foundation is a bunch of projects. So these were the founding projects. So resources, people really came together and says, we're going to come under one hood, and we're going to look for common goals and shared values, and see what we can do to keep these projects alive, healthy, maintained, and forward innovative as well. So again, I mentioned Jenkins X. Spinnaker's also a really important one, and Tekton being an alternative to, say, Jenkins is a cloud native solution to building pipelines. But so I've also said there's actually good news. So fresh news. On the right side, you'll see that there's some recently added projects that have came to the CDF. There's loads of innovative CD projects, but there's a reason that these projects are here, right? And they're really, really helping with the innovation, right? So as you can see on the left-hand side, 2 days ago, we had a new project join officially. This is called Shipwright, right? And again, it's for it's a delivery pipeline solution to help with stuff. And Ortelius to do with the deployment, again, similar solutions, and Screwdriver. So they're similar, but they're different, and we all want to encourage the innovation of these tools so that we all can then not say have to pay money to Circle CI or Bitbucket because we can just run our own stuff, right, and customize it and change it. So that's good. Also, the CDF has new things called SIGs, this special interest groups. This has came out of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. It's Computer Foundation. So basically, they have SIGs, special interest groups, like on the Kubernetes project, they have SIGs that focus on things like networking, security, other things. So it's kind of like the W3C, right? So they're like working groups in the W3C and all that. Effectively, the same has came out of what's happening in the Kubernetes ecosystem in CNCF. We're now doing that in the CDF. So there's 2 examples here of things that have started over the past few months. Again, this is where we're going to get the innovation and bring the power back to the open source world for us to continue to have for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, as we have now adapted to the dynamic and the changing dynamic with all these services and distributed systems that are necessary to keep scale and stability alive. So you can see from the text, it should be hopefully it's quite self-explanatory. The interesting thing, which is the events SIG, and you'll see how that ties in later in the talk, because I will talk about event-based stuff. And so you write something it's kind of like a protocol, basically, right? You're going to create an event. This event can then be dropped into Argo or into Flux or into Spinnaker or into Jenkins X. So you basically create something once, and it's kind of like an interface, right? And then you drop it in, and then these projects will adopt the event SIGs standards that are released eventually, and they will all be standards compliant. And so you can build basically a pipeline agnostic task to build your software, ship your software, run tests, etc. So that's actually quite innovative. So these are 2 key examples of innovation that's happening on the ground already. So watch this space. So in terms of innovations, I showed you the slide with all the projects. GitOps was on there. GitOps is something that's talked about a lot, so I'm not going to get into too much detail on it, but effectively it's, from this diagram, you can see that it's we dictate what the desired state should look like, and then we apply that onto a cluster, right? And so if the cluster goes bad, it doesn't matter because we can just reapply the state. And then when the state changes, events kick in, we do stuff like taking an application from staging to production. So the version of your service, like the authentication service on your platform, that's version 1. You want to release that to version 2. So it would use Git to store permanently what version should be in production. And that effectively is my nutshell of GitOps. There's a little bit more detailed one, but it kind of just repeats what I tried to say. It's just desired state, declarative state, storing it in Git, and it continuously synchronizes tools. So if you make a change in Git to say, I want version 1 now is version 2 of the application, that will be an event that will trigger, and then it will start actually triggering the CD tools. So GitOps will trigger and facilitate the coordination and communication between the different tools. So if someone changes on a Git repo to say what's the production looking like, then something will kick in and try to update the cluster and deploy that image, for example. So it's all about target, desired state, declarativeness, and I think that's why GitOps is getting so much attention, because it is the facilitator of change. And there are a few other alternative ways that people are managing, but this one is the one that seems to be hitting home over the past 1 year or so, and it's really allowing and facilitating drive forward without being like in the way of innovation. As mentioned at the very bottom of this slide, Argo, CD, and Flux are the main players in the GitOps world, in my opinion, and basically at the heart, also Jenkins X as well, but again, Jenkins X is still not as mature as Argo and Flux, so I didn't mention it here, but basically Argo and Flux are built in the GitOps mindset, so it's basically that's how they work, and so they're welcoming the new GitOps shift and harnessing that for us. So want to give some credit and some highlights to those tools in the GitOps context. This is very brief. Whereas Tekton is quite popular now, some of you may not know about it. So I just want to give you an example. 4 or 5 years ago, we went from building something that only works on Circle CI or only works on Jenkins or whatever. Tekton said, hey, we're going to allow you to create cloud native things. And that will run on any cluster, on any project, in any country, on any hosting provider. So you have a task, you have a pipeline, and you can run things, and it's basically just Kubernetes code, but it's quite bare bones. So before Tekton existed, companies would be creating their own things like this. You probably find now that most companies that are offering CD solutions, example Circle CI or whatever, they're probably at some point, if not already, will be replacing their own proprietary in-house code with Tekton, for example, to facilitate tasks that we can run across clouds. So I just want to, in my opinion, Tekton was one of the main shift from closed system, single thinking of just building pipelines and stuff from one system to agnostic. So I want to give some highlights to Tekton, and that's why it's part of the CDF. Jenkins X, which if you've not heard of it, it's an out-of-the-box cloud-native tech solution. You can install it on any cluster. So if you already have a Kubernetes cluster, you can say, Jenkins X, install on this cluster, and it will go. And then you'll have a fully like, badass CI and CD solution for you. And as I said, it mentioned here, it has environments. You define your environments. It goes and makes your environments for you. Under the hood, it's doing like Kubernetes namespacing and other, magical things. Again, you don't have to roll your own anymore. Jenkins X will give you out of the box stuff. Highly recommend you go and Google this, because we have Argo, which is kind of opinionated, but not quite. We have Flux, is the same. Jenkins is kind of like out of the box. And if you look at how the Jenkins project evolved, it was just plugins and plugins and plugins, hundreds of plugins. That was innovation and new providers and all sorts of things in the world. There's a Jenkins plugin for that, and you're going to see similar shift happening to Jenkins X to say, hey, we can integrate on Jenkins. We can integrate with this provider, right? We want to do that, but we want to do it in a cloud agnostic way, and a more improved way. So you'll see all the plugins coming over, and then people can start taking advantage of that stuff. It is GitOps powered, and one of the very, very cool things that Jenkins X gives you out of the box is called preview environments, which basically it's not just about taking a service that you have just built on CI and deploying it somewhere. They are actually doing like UAT environments, preview environments. So every environment has a host name, and every service on that environment has a host name. So you can basically, when you push your code to a branch, and the Jenkins X CI pipeline will kick in and run your steps, it will then like deploy that to the preview environment for your branch. So an example is if you've got a pull request and it's like pull request 123, it will actually create, you have a host name called pr123 dot preview dot yourcompany.com basically. So developers no longer need to, you just define how your software is put together quite simply, and it's basically at this stage it's just configuring Jenkins X to say, hey, these are environments that make sense to my organization, these are the services that we have, and then Jenkins will opinionatedly take over, and at that stage it's just configuring it. So it's the closest thing we're going to have, but it's not quite there yet. It's ready to use, but it's not like mature, it's not fully adopted. But this is where things are really going to like kick in big time, and we're going to get a lot of cool innovations on that. But this talk is kind of like an overview, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but definitely give this your attention. Maybe watch some YouTube videos, and the Jenkins X website publishes blogs and updates like every week, every single week. So all the new stuff, all the innovations, all the integrations with all these tools and all these third-party services, they're being added into Jenkins X. So it's basically going to pop. If you haven't seen it yet, it won't be long before you do see it. The Argo project is an umbrella. There's multiple projects within Argo, and a lot of them are they're innovative. Basically, they're taking things like GitOps. They're taking things like, I'll explain later in the talk. There's other things that are the future, because this is kind of like, this part of the talk is like where we are at today, right? So the Argo project is at the heart of innovation, and they're going to continue to push us forward. And whenever someone pushes forward, whenever someone pushes forward with innovation, then Argo are kind of saying, well, that's the wave, that's the future. So we're gonna allow you to utilize this new way in Argo. So you'll see more, but definitely if you've not given Argo a look, that's ready to go now. It's stable, it's mature, it's being used by all the top companies in the world, and for continuous delivery. So in theory then, if you've got a pipeline right now and it's like Jenkins or Circle CI or something, and it's just doing CI, so it's just building your software, running your tests, you would then trigger Argo from your CI pipeline, or somebody would trigger Argo and say, hey Argo, I have a new Docker image here for version 2, go and do it for me, and then Argo will take over, as with Flux CD. So these are the projects that sort of wrap around Kubernetes, but they have a focus on deployments, feature flagging, A/B testing of traffic coming in and out. So if you're not already using something like Argo and Flux, and you're using Docker and you're using Kubernetes, then you probably maybe rolling your own stuff, or it's a little bit too hard to maintain. So these guys take care of all that for you, and you just tell them and configure it, tell them what you want, and then it'll happen. And you can develop. They're not that opinionated as the closed source proprietary systems, so you get to shape the tools and the configurations around how your organization's processes, continuous delivery processes, need to work. And so that's why I'm recommending you take a look at them. There's this new thing called Kubevela. There's so many tools I could highlight. I'm just taking a few of them. This is for developers, right? Or for sort of DevOps, SRE, infrastructure people who don't really know Kubernetes that well, or don't want to maintain or write hundreds and hundreds of lines of Kubernetes files. So I'll take you through this slide. It's an abstraction on top of some Kubernetes topics. It's the right level for developers. And you just say, I want a web service, and it's just like 20 lines of code, right? And it looks very, very similar to a Kubernetes file, but it's just the details that developers care about. It's taking that shift away. Again, we're allowing, the whole idea of DevOps and like infrastructure as code is to allow, say, application developers and software engineers to be more capable of doing stuff, hard infrastructure and hard, networking things. So this is like another level on top of that to make it accessible for software developers. And so under the hood, it will create 6 to 7 Kubernetes resources, which at the moment, without this, you're basically writing yourself by hand, right? Or there is other tools that exist to help you with abstractions, but this one seems to be the one that's actually like taking off and getting the traction. So again, some innovation here. I recommend check it out, especially if you don't have a team of Kubernetes specialists in your organization. This could help you out big time. So that's kind of like part 3 of 4 of the talk. I have a question. There's a question in the chat. I'm gonna read it. If anyone's got any questions or like comments on what we've spoke about so far, now's the time to drop that in. So Vince Levy says, with Jenkins X, it was only useful for managing applications on Kubernetes. We still need the external Jenkins server to manage the cluster across our operational tiers. Fair point. You've got your own experiences and your own stuff. I don't know how, Vince, how long ago was it you tried that? There's been quite substantial innovations in Jenkins X, even of the past 3 months ago, and then even 1 month ago. It's really jumped. And so people adopting Jenkins X, like the early adopters, the feedback we get from that is really getting pumped into Jenkins X. Jenkins X is created by the team at CloudBees. CloudBees are the commercial company that are behind Jenkins itself, and they're also behind Jenkins X. So they have engineers working on Jenkins X like every day, 24 hours a day, basically. Q1, I was using Jenkins X in production, and so Vince has just replied to the chat saying that thing was early this year, Q1. I was also using Jenkins X then, and yeah, it was good, but again, it's still not everything was there. I would say Q2, definitely Q2 of this year, that's when the big jump came, really, and there's a lot of new stuff out there that's happened in Jenkins X recently. It's exciting, so I'm happy we're getting innovative. So yeah, good question, Vince. Thanks for that. So I wanted to now move us to the future, because the innovations are sort of work in progress, right? They're solving some things, they're not solving everything, but at least they're open source and we can shape them and mold them around what we do actually need to varying degrees of difficulty. So these are the 5 things I want to share with you today, and hopefully they are like reading material, but also just understanding, because when you're going to start seeing more and more things pop up over time, and it's important to understand why. So the first part of the talk was helping explain to people, if people didn't understand like why microservices, why everyone's going crazy about it, or why everyone's moving to proprietary CI/CD systems. And again, that was because the open source tech was not ready, right? And so that is helping explain why. Now this part of the talk is hoping to explain why you're going to see things moving forward. So not just what you're going to see, but why they're important and what role they're playing in the shift to the next evolution of CD, right? Now we're in 2021, not 1999 or whatever anymore. So GitOps is driving us forward. That idea is maturing fast, and it's becoming a lot more stable, and it's becoming integrated into a lot more softwares and platforms, and of course into companies who are taking advantages of what it provides. Unopinionated tools is probably you're going to see consistent. That's a kind of goes hand in hand with cloud native being unopinionated. It runs on any system. So you're going to see more and more unopinionated tools. Argo is driving us forward and utilizing all the innovations we're having. So it's just absolute gold dust there. So if you get the opportunity to use Argo software, or you want to just know how to do stuff, just go and look at their software. Go and look at the project. There's an umbrella. There's loads of projects solving different things, and you could probably just take one part of that helps your organization and start taking advantage. for me personally, the most exciting part is the innovation of pipelines. And again, I've got basically I've got 4 more slides in this talk. And that arguably there's like the innovations that I just described, like the tools and technologies, that is a whole talk in itself. You know, I could go into a full talk about Jenkins X or Argo and stuff like that. And even the next few slides you're going to see, there's not enough time right now to go into the level of detail. But I hope it gives you enough to grasp things and then do your own research, and it would be good to see, if everyone's getting any feedback, it'd be good to see what your thoughts are as well. And we've got a meetup group, so we can, and LinkedIn event to communicate. So if anyone's wants to have discussions around things, that'd be great to see what people's thoughts are on these tools, or if you've tried these tools and you've got any kind of negative points to say, then it'd be good to see them as well for constructive criticism. So the innovation of pipelines, basically, even today, right? You look at any CI pipeline, right? The 99% of all pipelines are still monolithic focused. They haven't really innovated much in about 10 years, right? Easily. It might look different on the surface, but the architecture of a pipeline hasn't really changed. It's the kind of linear process, and you do the first step, and then it moves to the next step, and next step, and next step, right? We are literally now on the edge of reinventing what pipelines mean. And again, it's contextual. It means now, to 2021, a pipeline means something very different than what it did 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, because of the demand and the change, and the change in architecture of our applications and platforms. So we're moving towards granular, small pipelines that are going to start reacting to events rather than like a synchronous flow of a synchronous flow of like steps or tasks in your pipeline, right? So we're moving. So this is what you're going to see. We're moving pipeline architecture to event-based architectures, because of it's very similar, and this is like a reflection of what's happened in the application world, in the software world so we went from single monolithic applications to multiple distributed systems, right? And the strongest way to keep these applications in sync, keep them talking to each other, but also to make sure they're not still coupled together, so they're quite independent services, we use events, right? Event-based architecture, event-driven systems, event sourcing, and a whole bunch of other things. That innovation has already happened and is already very strong in the application world. But again, the pipeline hasn't really matched, hasn't caught up. So this is why you're going to see this new adaptation, which is going to be basically reflective of the applications. So event-based applications are now you're going to see event-based pipelines and tools that facilitate and help you achieve these things. Originally, earlier on in my talk, when I said we had a traditional pipeline, and it was easy to build that pipeline. Now what happened is we needed 5 or 10 pipelines, and like, how did they integrate and when did they do things? So that's quite hard right now still to get right. And event-based architecture is how that's being solved. If you remember earlier in the talk, I said that the CDF has a events SIG, and these guys are focusing on events between, not just in the same system, but cross systems, cross project. So you can have an event, you can do a task in one technology, one pipeline, like a CI pipeline, and then a CD pipeline will be listening for that event, or there'll be like test suites sitting waiting for an event, and the tests will kick in once you do the prior thing. It's all going to be moving to event-based architecture, basically, because we have all these distributed services and parts. Event-based architectures do add complexity. They're not for everybody, they're not for every organization, but I think the larger organizations and the companies who are quite serious about achieving continuous delivery successfully, this is where they're going to need to be to basically keep up. And lastly, pipelines have started moving away, and they're no longer going to be deploying applications anymore. They're just going to do events, and there'll be another small pipeline that's waiting for that event that will do the deployment. And then once it's deployed, then there'll be another event that kicks in to say I have done my deployment, and other things will be listening. So again, it's going to be moving less from traditional pipelines to, we're thinking event based, we're thinking like the application developers are thinking already with their software. We're taking that mindset and it's going to go into pipelines. So I hope that made sense, what I said so far. If anyone's got any questions, just drop them in the chat, it's fine. Here's an example of something. So you build an image on the CI box and you push that up to the cloud registry. Now, you can either trigger that event yourself, or something will be listening, something up there will be waiting for that image to be there, and then that will create an event, and then that's it. And your CI pipeline's responsibility is not the entire process, but it's just like, I'm building an image and I push it, and that's that done, right? And then you'll have multiple smaller other pipelines. Again, the point is you can reuse these mini pipelines now, and that's where we're going to get a lot of value from our code. And so examples are, when you push to a Docker registry right now, with your Docker image, you can trigger your own scans, right? You can deploy the software when the image is there. So again, that's a pipeline for running security scans, for deploying the software. If it's production deployment or staging deployment or something else, you'll have your own events to run certain test suites, or test suites with certain parameters, like, oh, this is production, so you cannot actually like check out and do money things. It's production, so there'll be different test suites that are reflective for different types of environments. Again, it's all going to be really moving to event-based or granular focus to keep up. And then things like updating pull requests, right? Again, it's an event. That pipeline in itself is quite valuable. It's when the deploy has finished, then there'll be an event that says, oh, a deploy's happened. My job is to then go and update the pull request and say, hey, here's the URL for the staging site or for the preview environment, right? And so it's all, and again, Jenkins X is an example of a system that's already doing this, and it's got all the pieces together, all the parts of the jigsaw, and it's like, it's quite nice, but you'll see. So that's just a duplicate slide. Okay. And if the future, what you can expect from Argo is they are already there. Yeah. So they've fully innovated. You can already do this stuff, right? So Argo has two things. The workflows and events. Workflows is just another word for pipelines. They said they don't call it a pipeline anymore, because it's a pipe in itself is usually like a straight pipe, like a water pipe or something like that. Whereas these days it's all granular and small and event driven. So it's a workflow, right? If I have a decision to make, right? If it's here, we trigger these tasks. If it's here, we trigger these tasks, rather than the traditional linear approach. And so that's why Argo have named them workflows, and that Argo events is already there. So you basically can already start taking advantage of this stuff. And also, if you have a traditional system, but you want to just begin innovating at a small scale, just like one piece of innovation, you could build that in Argo, and then you would just trigger from your traditional system, like your Jenkins pipeline, your Circle CI pipeline, you would then just trigger an event. You just fire off an Argo, fire off an event and tell Argo, hey, this thing happened, and then the workflows will kick in. This is a good example where you split CI from CD. So say Jenkins or Circle CI is doing your CI, you're building, you're testing, and then you would hand that over to Argo and say, hey, Argo, you take over. That's not exclusive to Argo, because that's how Spinnaker and Flux CD and also work similarly. But the events and workflow stuff is gold dust. And again, this is the future. This is what you can expect in the next 12 months easily. So Damien wrote a message in the chat saying, is it possible to use Argo on-premise environments, or is other tool to implement GitOps in those scenario? I'll think about that. I'll get back to you at the end, Damien. This is probably like the last slide that I want to talk about. So although it's called Jenkins X, it's actually nothing much to do with the full Jenkins X project, which is like your CI pipelines, your CD pipelines, and all your stuff, right? It's part of the Jenkins X project, but it's not your traditional. It's a CLI tool, right? And I'll explain this. So it's, as it says here, it's an embeddable tool that you can embed to any legacy system right now. Again, Jenkins X CLI is not ready. I'm telling you this before it's even like launched, right? We're working on it right now, and we'll continue to work on it. It is and the idea is you're using something called the strangler pattern, we use this for modernizing legacy application platforms. We're now going to apply the strangler pattern to modernizing legacy pipelines, CI and CD processes and systems solutions. So it's basically saying 100% of your stuff is legacy right now. Rather than doing a big bang approach, you do the small granular approach, which is what strangler pattern is. And so you can basically say, I'm going to keep everything there, but when it comes to doing like something basic, right? Just start really small, get the foot in the door there with the organizations you're part of. You can have JXCLI. Again, it's a command line tool. So if your existing CI, Circle CI, Jenkins pipelines are running lots of CLI commands to do stuff, it's just another CLI command. So these systems, existing systems, have no idea of what they're actually running. They just run a command line, and then that will take over. You see here it says it's a plugin model. So basically, Jenkins X CLI is a gateway to Argo, to Flux, to Fleet, to pretty much any system that you can integrate with. They're being added overnight. So you can just tell, and it's an abstraction as well, so it's a simplification. You don't need to know how to talk to Argo, how to authenticate securely with Argo. You just basically give JXCLI what it's asking for, credentials-wise or information-wise, data parameterized calls, and then it will go and do that. I think it's Circle CI has a similar idea to this, which they call orbs, which is kind of like a generic plugin that you give parameters to. You basically just take a plugin off of the shelf to deploy something to Amazon Elastic Beanstalk or EC2 or do a task on a cloud system. Circle CI, GitHub Actions, and others, they are innovated in that space. But again, it's closed source. So JXCLI is the open source now equivalent of us, our gateway to taking things off the shelf, but you're not locked into a certain declarative like YAML format or Bash or Groovy stuff or whatever. It's just command line based, and you just feed it what it wants, and then boom, that plugin will kick in. And that's how you're able to connect and communicate to the modern systems and begin your modernization journey as we go from, what we've had for 10 years prior to what we're going to have in the next 10 years. So it's one good example of a foundation that I hope that will take off as we intend it to, and stuff. I'm just going to read Damien's question again. Can you use Argo in on-premises environments? I don't see why not, but maybe there's something I'm not thinking about off the top of my head. If someone else knows the answer to that question in the chat, then feel free to drop it in. Damien, also, if you don't get an answer here, you could probably drop this into the meetup group or something like that as a conversation, and I can get back to you, or other people can reply as well if to get your answer there. That is so far what I've got. The few highlights of what to expect in the future. Again, it's all just around granularity, event-driven systems, and some examples of tools like Argo facilitating this, Jenkins X CLI facilitating this modernization of the future. So that's what I've got today so far. In a few weeks' time, I'll have more information for the next version of the talk, and I'm going to keep iterating and evolving this talk on feedback, but also just as the innovations happen, I'm going to be communicating this outwards. So on that note, I don't know how long I've been speaking for, but that's me for now. I want to say thank you to a few people who have helped me out. So thanks to Steve. Thanks to Steve, who runs this meetup and helps organize everything and something. So massive help, massive thank you to him. And I think everyone will agree that it's a selfless task running a meetup, and he deserves a lot of respect from us, from the development community, to put this on. Basically, I want to say thank you to James Strachan, to Oleg, and to Victor for helping me on my the past few months on the cloud native things, Jenkins X things, CDF things, and also helping me prepare for this talk. This is the content of this talk is not just my opinion. It's a reflection of what information the CDF, the cloud native the Jenkins X projects and the others, what we want to tell the world, what we want to say. So they've been very instrumental in helping get to this point, and I look forward to what's happening in the future. I want to give a shout out to Jacqueline and Tracy from the CDF. They've been really supportive and helpful since I joined the CDF in general, and also helped me today with some stuff I needed help with. So massive thank you to them, and thank to you, the listeners. And my contact details are here. You can tweet me, ask questions, keep in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts. I can only improve this talk if I get feedback from people. So feedback is welcome. Positive and negative feedback is absolutely fine. I can take criticism. You can email me. Also, as I mentioned, I work as a consultant. I go into companies and I help them fix problems, innovate their companies, implement solid continuous integration, continuous delivery processes, and just harness the power of this stuff. I also do workshops. I know we're in the COVID world, so everything's remote, but I do hands-on on-site workshops and talks as well, and just training in general. So if any of that stuff is interesting to you, or you're having any problems with your CI and CD stuff in your organization and it's hurting you, you can drop me an email, and I'd be happy to even just have a conversation with you, just see if I can help you out. Just very briefly help you out, for free basically, or I'm available, theoretically available for hire as well, to come in and actually help you with your company. So I'm enthusiastic of what's happening and what's going to be happening in the future, and I look forward to seeing you all in the trenches there. That's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. I think really interesting talk. One thing actually I was curious about, and it was kind of going on Vince's question in a way, but you mentioned obviously there's been quite a lot of innovation since Q1 on Jenkins X. How often are these kind of new iterations or like innovations on specific tools actually coming out, or does it kind of vary from tool to tool, or how much time is kind of put into them?
Yeah, the latter. So it's depends what the project is. So for example, Jenkins X is actually funded by CloudBees, right? So they have engineers who are building this stuff every day. So that is different from, say, another project which is open source. That's pure open source, and it's just people. That open source is just people doing it in their free time and their own availability, right? So it depends on which project. It differs from case to case, but mostly it's like constant, I would say. Constant. Yeah. Every 2 to 3 weeks, I for example look at Jenkins X, and it's just like, wow, what is this stuff you can do? Because all the pipelines are run on Kubernetes. All the CD, all the tasks of your software is run on Kubernetes. What that means is Kubernetes gives you observability. You can look into things. So there's the way Kubernetes works is basically there's like it exposes metrics, and you can collect logs about all the events that are happening. And people are writing Jenkins X plugins that give you dashboards that tell you all your plugins, what's the health of your plugins, how much CPU and RAM are they using up on the cluster, all this mad stuff that you couldn't really do before on Jenkins, as an example, because it was like a Java system and Jenkins owns Jenkins. Now, just for example, Jenkins X is just the name of a tool. It doesn't own your stuff. It's all Kubernetes owns your stuff, right? And so basically Kubernetes, anything you can do in Kubernetes, you can take advantage of when building CI/CD focused stuff. And if you just go to Google and look at Google Images and just type in Jenkins X with images, you'll see mad stuff going on. It's blowing my mind, really, so to be honest.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, I'm sure everyone will join me in obviously thanking you for the content today. I know it's there's a lot of effort that goes into these talks, and yeah, I think, yeah, obviously massive thank you, and obviously thank you to everyone who has joined us today. So as Paul said, if there are any follow-up questions, feel free to use the meetup group, the LinkedIn event page, or indeed, you've got Paul's contact details there, so feel free to get in touch with him. I guess a quick outro from me. Obviously, it's in a community driven meetup. So if there's particular topics that you want to hear about, and even if you don't want to, particularly do the topic yourself, we're always here to kind of listen to those, find speakers, and obviously give the content back to the community. Yeah, and obviously on that topic, if anyone does want to does want to speak at any point, feel free to drop me a message. But no, thank you once again, Paul, for that. I think fantastic talk. And obviously big thank you for everyone for joining us. And Vince has just popped a little note in there, just thanking you as well. So yeah, massive thanks.
Cool, Vince.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone has a nice evening, and look forward to seeing everyone at the next one, and hopefully not too far away from some kind of face-to-face meetup. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Cool.
Excellent.
Yeah, all good, Mike. Thanks, guys. Keep in touch. Twitter is good, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat.